If you're working 5 days a week from home, you don't even need to be in Australia.
What should small to medium-sized businesses focus on in 2025 when it comes to marketing strategy?
It's a total bloodbath. The market out there is crazy. The worst market we've ever seen in 25 years.
When should companies hire full-time? When should companies hire fractional?
I think the cost of acquisition here is higher, but it doesn't need to be that high.
Hey everybody, welcome to Thriving in Australia. We have a fantastic guest here, Nicholas. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Hi, look, thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Nicholas Ridis. I was an academic in the schools of business across Sydney, primarily in marketing, management, strategy, project management, and a little bit in the School of Accounting. Did that for over 20 years. Lots of students, lots of subjects, and then AI decimated that industry. At the same time, I sat on the board of the Australian Marketing Institute, which is, if you're in America, the American Marketing Association is the same thing. And if you're in the UK, the Chartered Institute of Marketing. So we certify marketers across Australia via something called CPM, so Certified Practicing Marketer. So I sat on the board of that for multiple terms and did lots of conferences, and I've always been an entrepreneur, so I'm back into that and trying to find work and trying to get clients and everything else that has come along with this total displacement of humans with AI.
Fantastic. So you are a founder, you are a marketer. I just, I cannot wait for us to get started because I have so many questions and I'm 100% sure the audience will have the similar questions. So let's get started. The number one thing we would love to know is about how Australian founders think about marketing. Look, you have been around, you know this very well. Doesn't matter how much we talk about digital, social media is, there. Facebook is in US, in Canada, as well as in Australia. But the way people will use Facebook would probably be different, right? In Australia, than probably US. And there will be different kind of social medias, right? In one social media can be very, very popular in one country. And in another country, people might not even know the name, right? So that is the main overall topic of this podcast. Would love to know how founders in Australia look at digital marketing, what works, what does not, how do they react to it? So let's get started.
Sure. Lovely question. Look, I still think Australia is lagging behind the US and the rest of the world, and Australia has something called a tall poppy syndrome, whereas if you want to do something, we seem to just drag people down here, and I just don't understand why we do that. But if you look at a lot of the theories in marketing, most of them are coming out of the US. There's a great professor called Mark Ritson. He's absolutely, I think, one of the world leaders, and obviously now back in Australia. But I think one of the things we have in Australia is that we are still lagging, but we don't think we're lagging. So we have this mindset of we're ahead of the curve, we know what's going on. But when you start to talk, especially to older marketers, and I am an older marketer, but obviously spending 20 plus years at university teaching the thing, you end up around the younger generation. And every generation that I taught was roughly the same age. So I got to see everything from the birth of Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, and you could see the younger generations would actually take all this new technology on board. And then at the end, they'd become these laggards of looking at new things coming into the market and thinking, oh, that's new, I don't want to touch that. So I think it's definitely a mindset thing. And other parts of the world, especially say the US, which has Y Combinator, there's this focus on age doesn't matter. It's more open-mindedness and a growth mindset and looking at what's coming into the industry. So I was at an event in marketing and was talking about AI, and it was just, and I love AI. I've done a few different courses on LinkedIn and everywhere else that I can, and listen to lots of podcasts. And I'm, listening to, I'm going to butcher the name. But Mo Gadot and all those people. And his mindset of looking at AI of it's not a tool, but it's a replacement for humans. But you say that to Australians and they go, I'm smarter than AI. And then you try and say, well, what are you listening to and what are you reading and what's your reason for this and what are your sources? And it's all based on these personal opinions on feelings. And that's the part that I just don't get, because I think when you look at it, considering most of the large corporations are depending on where they headquarter for taxation issues, but they're generally not in Australia. And we have a few unicorns in Australia. So, we've got Atlassian, we've got Canva. But if you look at how these companies actually really grow, it's by starting here, but then they get out and then they go to the US and then they come back. And I think when I taught entrepreneurship at university, and we would use, for example, the strategizer.com and lean startups and all the different theories, I would always say to my students, look, the goal should be to get into something like a Y Combinator overseas, because our laws here are, if you are a founder and you go bankrupt, you're basically almost nearly dead in the water for nearly a decade. So the government here makes it very difficult to start something, have a failure, and then come back. And also then we don't have that mindset in Australian companies of a skunk works or an entrepreneur. We talk a lot about it, but what type of employee is going to take a risk to lose his or her job to come up with a new idea? I was listening to, another person I love is Rory Sutherland. And what type of employee, especially in today's economic climate, which seems that, we're running towards a recession and a depression at a rate that seems to be absolutely insane, is going to risk coming up with new ideas. So my concern is, Australia's a great place. It's got an amazing climate. It's safe. The people are wonderful. And I love the place because I was born here. But I think we make it very difficult for companies to start up because we put so many things in place. And I think you still need a set of rules and regulations so companies do the right thing by customers, but you also need to get out of the way of corporations so they can actually try, they can do things, they can start up, they can scale. But I'm talking to marketers, and for example, especially say in entrepreneurship, I find most of them are quite young. Most of them have done a course in marketing somewhere online by some marketing guru, I'm not going to mention names, who really doesn't know what they're talking about, but now they call themselves a marketer. And I think this is also part of a generational theme, especially when, so for example, one of my startups that I've just started is in scuba diving and helping, scuba diving operators not go broke, because there's a joke in scuba diving. How do you become a multimillionaire? Buying a dive shop. You start off as a multimillionaire, you lose money and you end up broke. And the reason is because they're not business trained, they're not marketers, and they generally just like scuba diving, but it's the same as people go, well, I like coffee, I'll open up a cafe by the beach. There's no real rigor behind it. But as I'm talking to people are going, I can help you with marketing. I go, well, what are your qualifications? What have you read? What have you done? I did a course by someone for 5 minutes on YouTube, and now I think I'm a marketer. And that's, I think, where, especially the AMI has processes in place to try and minimize those issues. But I think also at the same time, universities need to definitely change the way they're teaching, because the world is totally different. And if you want to interrupt at any time, please feel free to interrupt, because I can talk underwater.
No worries. I
Literally.
love this. I love this. I love the rant. I love the way you're heading with this. Can you tell me, because you just mentioned that you're very well connected with the startup community here, right? And as we know, these startups are mostly tech based. So these tech companies, what are they doing in terms of customer acquisition? Like, what is really working for them? And in terms of cost, if you had to compare, from between Australia and US, do you think customer acquisition cost is higher or lower in Australia than in US or anywhere in North America? What are your thoughts?
I think, and look, I'm talking purely from what I've seen. I still think it's more expensive here. I think even though all the researchers, Australians, are definitely innovators in regards to taking up technology, the younger generation here doesn't really have any money, and the baby boomers are the cash rich, and that's kind of across the world globally. So you've got this issue where companies are trying to launch. The baby boomers don't trust the companies because they're still focused on the old way of doing business, and I think that's changing. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm a weird Gen Xer because I love online, and I look at anything and think anywhere where it's going to sound pretty brutal, but anywhere that a company can replace a human, a company will do that as quickly as they can and go back to the previous revolutions. You have Amazon replacing staff with robots. You have go dark factories where there's no aircon, there's no light, but robots are doing all the work, and that's just coming. So I think the cost of acquisition should therefore drop, but I think you'll also have a lot more competitors coming into that marketplace as well. Uh, we don't have a lot of people. I mean, we are a really small market, and I used to say to people, when you really look at the world, we are, 1%. So most companies, I think, especially multinationals, look at Australia and think, I forgot, hold on, we've done everything else we can, let's go after that 1%, because it is so small, but Australians don't realize that. And, one way to look at it is, so the other startup I'm working on with a founder is a new type of relationship focused site that looks at relationships with humans from beginning to end. This came out of COVID. We found a lovely white space, and I'm trying to find 2 tech co-founders, and there's lots of data issues, etc., that we've come across, but we've got someone who's a PhD in stats, so that makes life a lot easier. But again, the laws here make it very difficult. So we sit there and think, do we even set that business up in Australia, or do we actually set it up somewhere else in a different place around the world and just not even operate here? But we want to use Australia as a test market and then move into that born global system as quickly as we can. The scuba shop, it doesn't matter. The scuba consulting company, so I'm a scuba diver. It doesn't really matter where it is, because that's more fun versus something that's going to make money.
Yeah.
And there is
Yeah.
that argument. A lot of people in entrepreneurship, have read that Paul Graham "Do Things That Don't Scale Easy" essay. But again, talking to marketers about those things here, I get blank stares in my generation. I think the younger generation is a lot better at this because they're looking on YouTube, they're reading podcasts. They're listening to podcasts. They're reading books. They're involved in the startup community as much as they can. But then they realize very quickly that we don't have a lot of funding in Australia either, because the government just can't find money. And the older generation doesn't want to pay taxes either. So there's this problem. And I think also the mindset of founders being, I want to own 100% versus I will take a smaller percentage and give more away, is starting to come across. But my gut feel, going back to the main topic, I think the cost of acquisition here is higher, but it doesn't need to be that high, because we still do things sometimes the way of the dinosaurs. And it's trying to educate the older marketers of, everyone uses ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was at this event and talking to some marketers, and everyone mentioned ChatGPT, but you say to them, so what else is out there? And there's just no knowledge, because it's just this very general knowledge of what they use for AI. But then you start to talk to them and say, so how do you use ChatGPT, or how do you say narrow AI? And they're just using it to write emails. And you think,
so much more
but
to
there's
do.
so much more out there that you can do.
Right. Love it. Let's get tactical, right? Digital marketing is so vast. We can talk about it for a year probably. In terms of these startups, like, what are the things what are the things are they trying? What are the things are working? So at the end of the day, I think every founders want to know, like, hey, there are like 8 different things we can do with digital marketing. Which one should I go after? I understand we can go after all of them, but at the same time, we want to go for things that are working, right? What are your thoughts on that? Like, how should startups acquire more clients with digital marketing? What channels would you suggest?
I think it depends on the industry that you're moving into. So, for example, what I'm seeing is TikTok has grown dramatically in Australia very quickly, because the cost per eyeball is still quite cheap. Obviously, Facebook, YouTube, all the rest. LinkedIn still seems to be a little bit of a weird thing, unfortunately, in Australia. And so I'm on the Facebook startup communities, and I keep saying to people, well, let's connect on LinkedIn, because I can then check you out and see who you are and make sure that you actually are saying what what you're saying is actually true. And then you can give me some proof. And, but I think it still seems to be, the younger generation is definitely on TikTok, and there's obviously the privacy concerns, etc. but I think TikTok is here to stay purely because of the cost per eyeball. Facebook in my generation is still quite strong. LinkedIn, I think, should be across all generations, and that, it is what it is in regards to LinkedIn maybe needing to be better at what it does. I think there is still a lot of that pressing the flesh here in Australia of having that physical network of someone that to try and help you, but maybe also at the same time, it's not the best person because maybe they're not at that level of skill. So I think what we need to do is also maybe look outside and you look at places like, say, the Philippines for virtual assistants, and the labor costs are minimal. So my gut feel is, depending on the generation and depending on the education of that generation and their appetite for risk and doing things differently, they should be better than where they are, is really the way I can put it. I think we're still US led. We still basically seem to follow what's happening out of the US. We look at some other countries as well, but I haven't seen anything yet where I go, this is just absolutely sensational, amazing.
Right.
Hopefully that changes.
Got it. Right. Fantastic. Let's give value to our audience. You mentioned some of the you mentioned that you are part of these Facebook groups that are pretty active. Can you name a few of them if they're not private? Can you name a few of them where maybe the audience wants to join? Which one of
So
them would you suggest? Right, recommend?
So there's so for physical groups, there's Fish Burners and Chalk and Stone. They're quite good. The Facebook groups, and they're in every state as well from memory. The Facebook groups are generally the Sydney startups, Melbourne startups, Brisbane startups, Adelaide startups. So they're quite good as well. There's tons of groups on LinkedIn.
If you think about it, the overall purpose of me asking this question is there are hundreds of groups, right? You can search for it, but which ones are like insanely active in your opinion and very helpful? They want to learn from each other, not about anything else, right? At the end of the day, look, at the end of the day, I truly believe it. Obviously, we're all here to make money, right? You want to make money with your business or and something else. I want to do the same. But at the same time, there's this thing where if there are 5 things I want to learn from Nicholas today, 5 things, and I know for a fact I cannot just search them. Like, I think we talked about it a little before we hit the record button of this podcast. So that's what I'm after. Like, what would you suggest?
Sure.
Like, even if you give like 2 names, what are those things that people would just jump in and join tomorrow?
So I definitely say the startup groups on Facebook. So Sydney startups, if you're based in Sydney, or the Melbourne startup chapter. And with Australia, 80% of the jobs are basically focused on Sydney and Melbourne. Then, so if you're, say, looking for employees and you put a job advert out there, you roughly get 1,000 kind of jobs in Sydney. You get 750 in Melbourne. You get about 500 in Brisbane. Adelaide gets about 100. And then you get a few in Perth and all that. So it's realistically, most of the business operates in 2 cities in Australia, and they're close to each other. So in those, it would be, if I was a founder, I would be on Sydney startups and Melbourne startups and possibly Brisbane startups. I'd be going to the Fishburne and the Chalk and Stone events. The universities also have now Commandant Entrepreneurship as well, so I'd be going to those. So in Sydney, the University of New South Wales has a great founders program. Keep in mind, I've taught for all the unis, but the UNSW one has quite a good reputation within the startup community. UTS has one, Macquarie Uni has one. All the unis have now started to look at it and think, if we can help not only our students, but also our alumni get something off the ground. So I think that's definitely a place that I would be as well. In regards to theories, I liked strategizer.com because it looked at ways of really simplifying it without making it too complex for people. And then you could go deeper and make it even more complex, but they had things like empathy maps, and you see a lot of people have taken those viewpoints and then changed it, but it's really strategizer.com, and that took quite a while to get to market. And then I would be on LinkedIn still, because I think especially the Gen Xers and the baby boomers who are on LinkedIn want to be able to find you there and work out who you are and check something out. If I was younger, I think also Instagram. Uh, so, for example, with the relationship/dating site, sure, there's all these competitors out there, but actually Instagram is now a major competitor for dating. So it's these companies where you sit there and think they started out doing this, but then they do something totally different, and you think, "Wow, never would have picked that." So, you have to be on Instagram, and then you've got to curate that image, etc. And how much do you give away, and that links back to personality. So going back, if I was a starting up, and in essence I am starting up, uh, it would be Sydney startups and Melbourne startups and possibly Brisbane startups online, LinkedIn, um, the Y Combinator equivalent, which would be here, fish burners or chalk and stone, and there's probably something similar in other states in
Right,
Australia as
right,
well.
right.
Um, and then the other thing I'd try and do is actually join the different institutes. So we have in Australia something called the Australian Institute of Company Directors, which actually has criteria to get into. It's difficult. It's not expensive. I think this is the other part where Australian founders want a lot of things for free, and and I used to say, I'll chat with other founders and I'll say, well, what institutes have you joined that actually work within your business? And they look at, say, the cost of joining of maybe $500 to $1,000, and they just balk at the idea. I say to them, but you will spend that on a night out. But here you have, if you're in marketing, you join the Australian Marketing Institute because you're a marketer. But at the same time, you then go and join the US Institute and the UK one, so you actually expand the network. And Australians don't think that way for some reason. I don't know why that happens and whether it's different in other parts of the world, but it's not just the AMI for marketing. It's, I'm doing some volunteering work with the Project Management Institute, and that's a totally different way of thinking. It's very scientific, very focused. And I did building construction first time at uni. So it's a different way of thinking. There's, the Australian Institute of Company Directors, which is really good for networking. And there's all these other networking groups, and most of them still need to keep the lights on. So they have to charge because it's a business. And,
Right.
um,
I mean, I think I love the fact that you have to pay for it, because I think it creates the barrier. Like, hey, this is, that you're paying for it, and this is how much you're paying for it. So other people who can afford that money, they're also there. So that's like the baseline. Like, this is how you know that you'll actually be connecting with like-minded people. Like, think about LinkedIn, right? Anybody can get connected with you. Anybody, right? Like-minded people, not like-minded people. But with this kind of paid groups, anybody who you're asking, hey, give me your credit card, they will always think twice before giving you the credit card. So I love the fact I'm actually absolutely for joining this group, and especially joining these paid groups, because that's when we know, even if they have 25 people, I know these 25 people mean business. They're not there
Absolutely.
to waste their money or time, right? So we talked about startups. Can we add little more, little value for the founders of small companies? And we both know they are different, like small companies and startups. I know a lot of people will have the misconception that, hey, small business means startup. They're different. Now, with these small businesses, what do you think? And let's merge this with another topic that I'm very excited to talk about. 2025 is here, right? Is here. What are your thoughts on 2025 marketing strategies? What should small to medium-sized businesses focus on in 2025 when it comes to marketing strategy? What are your thoughts?
Yep, nice question. So what we're seeing in the marketing industry is the growth of the fractional CMO, and basically because companies are getting rid of marketers in a nutshell. It doesn't matter which way you want to code it, and you can code it with lovely bits of, fluffiness. I've got a very direct personality as well. But basically what's happening is companies are starting to remove marketers. They're starting to replace them with AI where they can. They're I went to South by Southwest and AI was everywhere, and most of the marketing CEOs talked about building agents that focused internally, pulled all the tacit knowledge as much as they could internally, and then went outside and sucked what they could from the internet. But were basically building these multi-skilled agents to replace humans. And this is, I think, where we're definitely going to go, because even though sure it's narrow AI at the moment, I think we will end up at wide AI very, very quickly. And I think a lot of people are maybe underestimating the power of AI. And then I think once we end up with superhuman, super intelligent AI, then we're all in deep problems. But there's definitely a rise in the fractional CMO, and I'm finding with a lot of people at the same time when because I'm also looking for work as a marketer, and it's a total bloodbath. The market out there is crazy. I'm speaking to recruiters. They're saying it's the worst market we've ever seen in 25 years. We don't think it's going to get better. We hope it will. And then you can see AI just come through specific industries and just remove humans from it. So I think for small business, this is a good thing, because you're going to have a lot of skilled marketers coming onto the marketplace who will be generally unaffordable for a business, but would be affordable as a fractional CMO. And the Australian Marketing Institute just had something on this in regards to fractional CMOs. So I think that's definitely coming. I think what will also happen is small businesses will be able to access fractional, CFOs and fractional legal officers. So as AI goes through and decimates industries, all these people will need something to do. Totally different from a government point of view. But I think that's a good thing for businesses if they're also open to it. But then also that opens it up globally. So one thing that that a lot of people didn't realize is when COVID hit and you could all work from home, if you can work from home and you don't need to be physically in the office, then you can hire anyone in any part of the world as long as they can communicate with you until we fix the issue of translating issues, which will come with AI anyway. So you didn't actually need people in Australia. It'd be nice if they came into the office, because I think you look at Maslow's hierarchy. Sure, we're all social people, but if you're working 5 days a week from home,
Yeah.
you don't even need to be in Australia. And keep in mind, in Australia, a lot of our superannuation is in office buildings that need to have humans in them to pay the rent. So it's this wicked problem that is this multi-headed hydra of we try and fix one thing here, but then we cause all these other problems somewhere else. And small businesses, in Australia, it's globally the same stat. Most small businesses fail. The few that actually make it to the end is a matter of skill, but then you go to the TED Talk and it's actually a lot of it is luck. But these founders and the small business people will tell you it's got nothing to do with luck. It was their hard work and grind and all these things that we focus on. So I think what will happen is we're going to have a lot of people on the marketplace who are moving into fractional roles that can work for different companies, but can then work anywhere in the world. But what does that mean for a full-time wage or a full-time role? Or what does that mean for non-disclosure agreements or anti-compete clause or all those types of things? And what knowledge can you bring with you as a CMO, having worked for company X, but going across to company Y? But I think it'll be a good opportunity for small businesses, primarily because they will have access to a talent pool that'll just be amazing.
Yes.
Until those small businesses can try to work out how to remove that talent pool by replacing it with AI that actually works.
Got it. Got it. Can I ask you this? Because we're talking about fractional CMO. Let's give more context to our audience, right? Can you tell me how much, like, for example, somebody with 15 years of experience, right? If that person is a CMO in Australia, how much would that person make? Or let's put it this way, how much a business needs to pay to that full-time person? And instead of hiring that full-time person, how much a business should pay the fractional person and still get almost same amount of job getting done, right? So can we give them more context about overall payment and the benefits of Or like, there are times when a full-time CMO makes a lot more sense than fractional. And then there are times when a fractional CMO makes a lot more sense than this full-time CMO. So my question again, if I'm repeating myself, when should companies hire full-time? When should companies hire fractional? How much they should pay? Or like what should be the expectation inside their head? Like, hey, I should be paying this much for full-time. And by, hey, I should be paying this much for fractional. And what does that even mean?
Sure, nice question. The average wage in Australia is about 90,000 Australian dollars a year. So we have quite a high wage average globally. Average marketer will come out of uni on, $60,000 to $70,000. You move up through the ranks, you get your certifications, you go do some study, etc. CMOs should be on between $200,000 to $400,000 a year. Depending on the size of the company as well, but that's where you generally will be sitting as a CMO. Now, obviously, a small business can't afford that because the owner of the small business only has a few employees. They're focusing on paying themselves. So that's, I think, definitely where fractional CMOs can come in. And you also need to keep in mind the average fractional CMO, and I was just looking at some of the data, is roughly about 50% the cost of a full-time CMO. Now, the issue is then what happens to do you have a competitive advantage by having someone full time? I think if they're up to date and know what they're doing, absolutely. But at the same time, maybe a fractional CMO is bringing in a totally different mindset. There's none of that politics that goes on at work, so they can be open and honest. And God knows I've sat in multiple board meetings as a director, and I will say exactly what I think, and I'm happy to disagree with people. I'm still respectful, but I'll also try and remove the conversations away from gut feels to let's look at some data and let's actually see what's happening. And I find that, again, a lot of people focus on feelings versus data. And I think that that's where the benefit of having someone outside of the company coming in, because they can say what they believe and what they think. It removes that issue of culture, I think. So it's not as strong because obviously if you're a full-timer and an employee, you're super mindful about how you say, when you say it, who's above you, who's below you, and all those things, and the 360-degree feedback. So I still think it's a good thing. And even as a full-time CMO, you can then go outside and hire agencies, and I think they do that to protect themselves, because it's that argument of, if I hire someone outside and they make a mess, I can blame them and still keep my job
Exactly.
safe.
Absolutely on point. Can I ask you this? What do you think founders should be expecting from a fractional? Like, we get it, right? Founders should be paying half of the money to the fractional CMO. What should they expect? What are the right expectations and what are the wrong expectations? Because I often see, like when people work with marketers, things go wrong because of the miscommunication, because of wrong expectation. What should be the expectation of a founder from a fractional CMO?
The first thing is that this person, in essence, is almost a founder themselves. So their mindset is, I'm an agency, I'm a founder, I'm out
Right.
there looking for clients, and you are a client of mine, but I'm also working for other clients. And you as the founder may not be it's the old 80-20 rule. You might be that client that really doesn't bring in the money for them, that might be possible in the future to be a major client, but at the moment you're not. So that's this issue that every business person kind of lives and breathes their own business. So you have these fractional CMOs who used to be employees and didn't have to worry about going out there and hunting, because there is a huge difference between marketing and sales. That they are not the same thing. They're very different. They work well together. But I think a fractional CMO is still out there trying to look for work, because everything is that gig economy if you're fractional. So you're always looking for work. And then you've got to be mindful of, do I work for company X? Do they have a competitor Y? What happens if I work for them? Do I get locked out? So it's having that communication and conversation with those companies and those founders to say, this is what I bring. This is what I've kept up to date on. Here's my skill set. These are my, industry certifications. You can go and check me out. Um, uh, anyone can write testimonials anyway, and that's easy to do. So there's like, how much do they really mean when it boils down to it? But I think finding someone who understands the culture is quite important, but who doesn't get caught up in the politics of the business is I think actually super important. Um, but then also giving that fractional CMO the ability to not constrain them into, well, you've worked for me, you can't work for anyone else, in regards to maybe working for a competitor. So it's starting, and I think this is where we're learning, as obviously we're moving a lot more into a gig economy, and we will have people working in these different types of roles of how do we navigate this very bumpy road going forward. But I think for small businesses, it's fantastic because you should specialize and focus on what you do. So, I look at it as I'm launching this, scuba strat, which is obviously why I'm in a diver's top. But I'm also shouting out to, there's something called, Divers Alert Network. And what this company
Awesome.
does is it saves scuba divers when things go wrong. And that's all they do. And so they have this really on point mission of, things go wrong, we help you, we save you. And then they use, so you've got some of the best doctors in the world and some of the most skilled people in dive medicine who will help you, but they know where they play and they bring experts in from the outside to help them. And I think that's where a lot of small businesses need to go. I do this and I do this really well. I don't want to do that. And for that, I'll bring someone else in, and whether that's a full-time, because maybe you can go fractional CMO in the beginning, and then if the CMO is great, you can then say to them, well, can I bring you on board, or can I bring you on board in a certain way, but still let you be a fractional CMO to someone who doesn't compete against me? Because that's the other thing. If once you start to be in control of your destiny as a human, and we all want agency as adults or as humans, then the fractional job is, I can actually now have control and I'm not beholden to someone. I can go do whatever, whenever, however I want. And I think a lot of companies are starting to see, well, if we go fractional, then we also need to open up that command and control type of management system, and maybe turn it into a bit more of a leadership system, which is a very different mindset for business owners as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, I can talk with you all day long. We have so much in common, and there is like so much to learn from you, and I'm 100% sure audience can learn from you a lot. Let's end with this one topic. And you mentioned this certification a few times, how important certification can be for a marketer, and how you also mentioned how founders should hire these certified marketers instead of just looking at their testimonial. Can you give us more idea about this AMI? Can I ask you this? You have been with AMI for a long, long time. W- why did you join there? And one more question with this is, what really, really helped you, Nicholas? What did you get out from AMI? Why would anybody join?
Look, lovely question. So first time I went to uni, I did building and construction, and I think I joined the Building Surveyors Institute and did very little with them. And then when I went back and did business, marketing, and management, I looked around the room and I thought, I am actually older now. And keep in mind, I did building, took a year off, and went straight back into uni, so I wasn't that much older. But I looked around the room and thought, I need some sort of competitive advantage against everyone else. And I then joined anything that had to do with business. So I joined the Australian Marketing Institute. I joined the Australian Institute of Management. I couldn't get into a Australian Institute of Company Directors because I didn't have the criteria that they wanted. I networked like crazy, and when I looked at it, I thought, okay, I obviously have a certain time that I can give something back. And I joined the AMI primarily because obviously I wanted to go into marketing. I looked at the certification system. I had started teaching at universities and the schools of marketing, so that made sense to me. I joined as a counselor, so all the people who work, everything from board director down, apart from the office staff, are all volunteers. And so I think you need to volunteer and give back to whatever industry you want to get into. I'd tried to do some work with a range of company directors. I've got life membership now with the AMI, so that's basically the highest level, and that's why I've switched into the Project Management Institute and I was teaching Project Management Institute at uni for the last few years. So different mindset, different type of thing, and I've started that journey again of volunteering, trying to help the Project Management Institute on sponsorship and bringing in a marketing viewpoint to something that is very different. And that's why, because I looked at it and went, well, if this is my career, I actually want to drive my career and control it and have this skill set and knowledge. And we certify marketers. One of the things I set up with a co-founder, Dr. Peter Sinclair, was this accreditation of universities, where if you're a student, you went to a university, it was accredited for their marketing degree because the staff knew what they were talking about and they were up to date and they spoke back to industry. And you had, I'm on a lot of advisory boards, so you're on these advisory boards and panels that speak to the universities and sit there and think, okay, you're still talking about Kotler. Where in the world is the internet in your degree? Or where is,
Yeah.
for
Right.
example, I don't know, AI. So I speak to students I'm no longer teaching, but and I want to get back into it because I loved it, but I think you need to go really wide.
Right.
That T profile needs to be
Right.
super wide these days. So you need a certification from an industry body, and it shouldn't be just one industry body. So I've said to everyone, for example, sure, you're a marketer, join the Australian Marketing Institute, get your certified practicing marketer, then go wide and see what else you need to join. Because that way, if you're in the room, someone might have never heard of the AMI, but they might have heard of PMI or they might have heard of AICD. So if you're part of all these different institutes, you then at least have a bit of that social proof in that group, because someone can go, I've never heard of them. Oh, but I've heard of them. And that's why I did it, because it was purely me looking around the room. And, we have this system of saying to people, it's not competitive, but it is, because if you're out there looking for clients or looking for a role, it is pure competition. And the person with the most kind of brains and skill sets and things that they bring to the table wins. And you get to learn from other people as well. But at the same time, certification is not the be all and end all. You actually then need to go out there and educate yourself and be way ahead of the curve, so that if you meet someone, you can give them value for free straight away.
Right. Right. No, love it. Love it. By the way, I'm also part of AMI. I do need to renew my membership, but I'm definitely a part of it. Love it. I love the community. And fantastic. No, Nicholas, again, as I said before, I'm 100% sure this is definitely the first time, but not the last time you're on this channel. I would love to have you here
Lovely.
one more time or a few more times.
Absolutely happy to.
Everything that you mentioned here is so good. We did not only talk about theory, like overall strategy. We also went tactical. We also talked about to the point where, hey, here are the groups that you might want to join. So this is the kind of value I like giving people, like not just saying, hey, you should do this. No, like this is how you do it, or this is where you go, like very tactical. So people know what to do next after they have watched or listened to this podcast, right? Nicholas, thank you so much for being with us. I love it. And if you're watching this episode from YouTube, do subscribe and hit that like button. If you're listening to this podcast from any other channel, do subscribe. Nicholas, thank you so much and see you next time. Take care. Have a good one.